Oh, welcome back to Highlands Postcards from the Finish Line. Remember to stop your cramp, not your race. Also brought to you by Polar. Chase your destiny. Our guest, top age group runner and triathlete, nutritionist, Pam Nisevech-Bede. How are you?
I'm fantastic, Bob. Thank you for having me.
Now, are you running on Monday?
I am not. EAS was kind enough to send me to Boston to do some media, and then I'll be over at the Runner's World booth also dishing on nutrition later this afternoon.
And let's talk a little nutrition. We got 30,000 folks here with 30,000 different tendencies in what they eat and getting ready for a race. How have things changed? From my perspective, I've seen a lot of us used to carbo load night before, 2 nights before. That a lot of that has changed, right?
Yeah, I would say over like the last decade of doing this and working with runners, we really did used to be bagels, bananas, burritos as big as your head all the time.
Yes.
There's been a bit of a shift towards more protein and more fat. And of course at EAS Sports Nutrition, we like that because we're big into protein and we're also big into the ketogenic diet. But I would say just on the whole, people are becoming more moderation is key a lot of times. And I love that because, I think it's best to have that, kind of varied plate when you look down and have it split into, say, thirds and a little meat, little starch, little vegetable sort of approach.
What do you recommend in terms of how people break it down with protein and fat and carbs? Because that's changed significantly.
It really has. When I started out, and I look back on some of the things I've written, when you got towards race day, and you should still carb load, clearly.
Right.
We were recommending 70% or more from carbs. We've really brought that down over the years, luckily. It's really hard for athletes to manage that amount of carb, and then you get to the starting line, you feel a little stiff and waterlogged.
Lethargic.
You do.
Yes,
it's a really different, it's kind of silly that we recommended kind of really changing up your diet in the days leading up to race, but now it's more, I'm still at probably 55% carbohydrates for athletes, depending on their goals, of course.
Of course.
And then the rest is split between protein and fat.
You balance between being a competitive runner, competitive triathlete.
Yep.
Do you eat differently depending on if you've got a marathon coming up or if you've got a triathlon coming up?
I try to eat pretty clean and pretty healthy whenever, all the time. The only time I might change it up is really honing in on a higher carb meal the night before a really long race or a long run, long workout. But also if I'm trying to cut weight to get to a race, like most people, I'm cutting out the carbs and I'm adding in more protein and more fat.
So a lot of folks, and we see the nice thing about running is it's an equal opportunity abuser, right? Anybody can come in, we want you, big, short, tall. But I see a lot of folks who run a lot of marathons and they're carrying a lot of extra weight.
Absolutely.
And that can't be good for the joints, right?
No.
At the end of the day.
No, it's not. I have so many clients who come to me at Swim, Bike, Run, Eat, and they just want to drop 5 pounds, 10 pounds to get to that race weight. And it can be really difficult. And recently I had the kind of the thought with, if you can ever find an Ultra G treadmill and you need motivation, get on that and tell the guy, I want to run 5 pounds lighter, 10 pounds lighter. And then you can feel what it's going to feel like on race day if you can actually, pause and be like, no dessert, no to this, no to second sort of thing.
Yeah.
But people, you see it in this race, you see it in all races. People are carrying more weight,
And it affects you all across the board.
It does. It's hard on the joints.
Yes.
It would be so much easier for all of us to get to the finish line a little faster, within reason, right?
Yes.
There's within reason,
Yes.
but it helps.
What I noticed personally, because I dropped about 24 pounds, and I, like you said, I do get on the Ultra G, and I was like, oh my God, you start looking at losing at 5 pounds or 10 pounds, and you're going, I don't feel anything.
No, and you did it through like low carb, high fat, right?
Yeah, just changing, eliminating a lot of sodium from it and getting rid of bread, butter, sugar, salt, and just eating almond flour, coconut milk, replacing a lot of the whole flour type of thing.
Right.
Or wheat flour. So for me it was more less of a diet and more just changing my lifestyle,
Right.
and which is really probably the way to do it.
It absolutely is. When we hear the word diet, it's like a 4-letter word.
It really is,
And then
yeah.
people, you start to feel really deprived, and it's just not the lifestyle you want to live. But when you go at it as approach, like, I'm changing my lifestyle, I'm changing my entire outlook, I'm just eating cleaner, I feel better, I feel lighter, it's easier to achieve.
The thing I noticed the most for me was I would have what I thought was a healthy lunch. I'd have a brown rice with chicken and vegetables,
Yeah.
and feel like, okay, that was great. And I'd invariably fall asleep in the middle of the afternoon. And I think for me, particularly, I think that's why it's so individual, right?
It really is.
Because
I'm so glad you said that.
Other people, that they need that.
Right.
Where I personally, I could eat a salad the night before a race.
Yep.
Because probably I've got carb stores. But other people, you've got to eat more carbs to have the fuel for race day.
It is, and some people respond better to a high carb diet depending
Yes.
on just their genetic makeup and just their training load. I talked to a young guy yesterday, and he was at a good 4,000 calories a day, and I always think, man, what I could do with 4,000 calories, right? And he was very, very high carb, very rice-based diet. Yeah. And he was very thin, and it worked for him, and he felt energized.
Yes.
Whereas if you found someone else, first of all, 4,000 is a lot. And then, if you have a high carb diet, you might feel like you have to take a nap at all times.
Right, and I noticed that because back in the day when we'd all carb load before Ironman, I never really had a good Ironman, and I never put that 2 and 2 together.
Yeah.
Talk about the ketogenic diet, and
Right.
because it's fairly revolutionary.
It is. So the ketogenic diet, as you know, it is about 75% fat, 20% protein, 5% carbohydrate.
Okay.
Now, it depends on your sport. It's very popular among long course endurance athletes and also strength athletes and physique athletes. Endurance athletes get maybe about 10% of their calories from carbohydrate. But what it does is when you take all that carbohydrate out of your system and you take the glycogen levels very, very low, your body is forced to find another source of fuel. Mm-hmm. Because usually, you've got some insulin and blood sugar levels that are working in concert in your body. Mm-hmm. And that's usually the way most of us run. But if you pull out that glycogen, you have to run off fat. And
Right.
you have to run off ketone bodies. That's why it's called the ketogenic diet. You're running off ketone bodies. And what you can do is, we all have plenty of ketones and plenty of fat that we would love to burn off.
Yes.
And what it does is it forces your body to tap into your own fuel stores, which is fantastic for weight loss. It's fantastic for those runners or those athletes with a really sensitive stomach that's like, I can't tolerate gels, I can't tolerate sports drinks.
Yes.
And people have been finding success. I've found more of my clients find success with following the ketogenic diet early in training, that early training block where you're not necessarily doing as much threshold and as much tempo, but you're trying to get to a race weight and you're trying to just, shift into a lower weight class. And the nice thing is some research has shown that when you follow this ketogenic diet, when you eventually revert back to maybe a more liberal lifestyle with carbohydrate, your body is still efficiently burning fat, more efficiently than you were previously.
What do you recommend on race day in terms of that pre-race meal, and also, at the aid stations they've got the gels, and there's a lot of sugar content there, and that could affect people different ways.
My overall recommendation is always nothing new on race day. Okay. So
if you're training with gels,
if you're training with gels, if you're an oatmeal consumer before a race, like whatever you're doing in training, if it works for you in training, that's what you should be doing on race day. And I have plenty
That seems simple,
right?
But people change that all the time.
I have plenty of people who come up to me and be like, oh, hey, what should I eat before the race? And we're talking like 2 days out. And you're like, well, what did you do before those 16 long runs you did? Oh, I didn't think about that,
Or then they're leaving after talking to you to go buy a brand new pair of shoes for the race.
Right. Or they come up and they're like, hey, I got this new bar. I'm going to try it at mile 20. Oh, that's a terrible idea, But I had, a conversation with the folks at Runner's World yesterday with one of our expert panels, and she was really concerned about hydration because it's going to be a little bit warm on Monday.
Yes, yeah.
And, you think about on a race, it's a catered
workout,
right?
baby, yeah.
But if during training you're not having a sip every mile, do you really need a cup of fluid every single mile during a race?
Yes.
It's something to think about.
And normally we do that just because it's there.
Right.
And we feel like if it's there there for a reason.
Yeah, or if at the end of the run you're like me and you're like, just run to the next aid station, just run, get me through it. And clearly it's going to be warm, so hydration is going to be a factor, but we don't want to overdo that hydration.
So speaking of training and hydration, you had opportunity to go Dave Scott camps over in Hawaii. And obviously you're a professional nutritionist and you've been doing this stuff for a long time. There's something about Dave that takes all of us to another level in terms of understanding what we do and how we do it. Did you find that? I
did, and the camp is fantastic. Anyone who can, attend the 4 Seasons Dave Scott Tri-Clamps, highly recommend that.
Yes.
But the thing I love about Dave is he's always had that approach of it's quality and not quantity as far as training.
Yes.
And as we look at us older athletes, or you're a professional and you're trying to fit a family and your job and everything into training, that tends to work really well. So the camp is very much technique based and really honing in on your form and things like that. Dave and I we do agree a lot on kind of an approach to nutrition. Dave is very much all keto all the time. And I think it definitely works for him, and it can definitely benefit that long course triathlete.
Yes.
And he has a really good knowledge base when it comes to keto and nutrition and training and everything.
I learn something every time.
Absolutely.
I talk to Dave about training. So what races do you have coming up? Is this going to be a triathlon year or a running year?
Yeah, I think it's going to be probably a running year. The triathlon I love, but the training it requests a lot.
Yes.
I'll do Cap City half marathon at the end of April. I have a bib for New York. So we'll just, go into it and see how it goes.
I love it. And where will you be on race day here?
I'll be at home with Easter Bunny duties.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm like you. It's probably hard to watch a race when you're like, I'm not running it this year.
Yeah, if you're not running, you don't really want to be there.
Right, but I think it's going to be a fantastic day for the runners.
Yes.
Boston is, out of all 21 marathons I've run, it is my favorite.
Why?
It is the history of the race. It is the feeling that the city brings out to the race course. I mean, you have fans the entire way.
Yes.
Every other race you run, there's like, that one pocket where it's silent.
There's no silence.
There's no silence.
Nothing.
It's fantastic.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Which is why Elvis does well here.
Elvis does do well. Yep.
Pam Nisevech-Bede has been our guest again. This is Postcards from the Finish Line, brought to you by Highlands. Stop your cramp, not your race. We're also brought to you by Polar. Chase your destiny. Hold on, everybody. We will be right back.